Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and this is First Conversations. These are episodes of the Eddy Network podcast that were created last year, 2023. My guest today is Gail Boenning, and she's a writer and a kind of a poet and kind of a creative genius in many ways. She writes regularly every day through 3 different voices, all within about 100 words. It's an amazing thing that she's done. She's also the author of a very good book on her experience of breast cancer and her coming through that. So this is my first conversation with Gail, and we've found a friendship there where we really appreciate the work that we both do, and I'm glad to share this again with you all today. I thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. And my guest today is Gail Boenning, author and creative person who I've just gotten to know over the last few weeks and have begun to read her books. And I find her fascinating from the standpoint of a person who has decided to be a writer and why she is writing. So, Gail, thank you for joining us today, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I'd like to start by thanking you for having me on your podcast. I've listened to a number of episodes now, and I have an understanding of the why behind what you're doing. Today, you talked about networking and filling in the gaps, and that just seems like it coordinates with the same path I have been on. So thank you for having me. I feel like it is a gift, and it is a gift to be seen and heard. So very much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Okay, so did you say you'd like me to start with a little history?
Yeah, tell us about yourself and how you came to be a writer.
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll shorten it as best I can.
We have time.
Okay, so my history professionally is I started out working for the Social Security Administration as a claims administrator, and I was there for 10 years. Then after my son was born, I made the decision, my husband and I made the decision for me to be a stay-at-home parent, which was an absolute gift. Then I got to work for about 5 years in a kindergarten classroom where my knowledge of life blossomed. You learn more from 5-year-olds than is even describable. Mm-hmm. After that, I started a small food business, which is what led me into writing. I never really considered myself to be a creative person. That was my sister's role in the family. I was the one who showed up and did the job and, took care of the nuts and bolts. But what happened when I had that small business is I found that I really enjoyed the creation of the materials, the labeling, the packaging, the messaging behind it, and writing a blog for the product. And that led me to a platform called Medium, where writers share all kinds of stories. But I was fortunate to come across a gentleman named Johnson Key, who started a challenge called 100 Naked Words. And the challenge was to show up every day and write 100 words. Even if you had nothing in you, could you still do it? Could you write 100 words? And something about that was like being bitten by a bug. Once I started, I couldn't stop.
That's amazing. So, when my first writing gig was as a community columnist for the local paper 24 years ago, and I was limited to 500 words once a month. So being able to say something in a very short frame like that is quite a challenge. So did you find that same to be true with you?
I was a rule breaker, Ed. I rarely held to the 100 words. I was often above that count.
But there was no contest or anything, or was there? No, it was just a challenge to write, sort of like this November being the month to write a novel, that
Yes.
sort of thing. Yeah. So, well, that's great. And what was it that you started writing about? What was your first kind of topics that captured your imagination?
One of the very first stories I wrote, Ed, had to do with my mother's passing. Was vulnerable. Brene Brown talks about, I wasn't even aware of her at the time, but she talks about vulnerability. And it was a vulnerable post about the summer I was 10 years old and spent a lot of the time in the hospital waiting room by myself. And I remember writing it and having tears running down my face as I wrote it. And it just felt to be able to share that piece of myself, even if nobody read it. So as I wrote the piece about my mother in the summer I was 10 years old in the hospital waiting room, there were tears flowing down my cheeks. And it was just such a release to let go of this thing that my subconscious had been holding on to for much of my life. So in that way, writing became a superpower. It was a way to go inside and get things that were maybe hidden outside of myself.
That's amazing. I found that to be true as well. It's a form of communicating with yourself, kind of. And I tell people, well, you got to write in order to know what's going on in your head and in your heart. And if you don't write, then you're just going to be confused because you never learn to articulate it. And I think that's what I've learned over the years of writing. So when you first started writing, not for yourself but for other people, so you really were trying to communicate. Where did you first go to write? Where did you first present your writing to people? Was it Medium? Was that where it was?
Yes, it was at Medium. And as I said, I was part of this community called 100 Naked Words. And I have to say that being part of a community for me at that time was integral to know that not that anybody was holding me accountable, but there were people there who would know whether I showed up or not. And what happened is we had the capability of commenting on each other's stories. So I started to get to know people from all over the world. There was a woman named Sanika who lives in India, and we still connect to this day. There was a young woman who was in college. She had pet rats. I just remember finding that so interesting and asking her questions about that. So the community portion of it, the networking piece, was integral to the writing.
Yeah, I found that to be true as well. And it's the vehicle for networking as much as it is anything. And that's been fun. So, have you been out in public where you do book events and you tell stories out of your books and people come up and buy your books that way? Have you done those kinds of events?
I have not done any of those kinds of events yet, Ed. So what happened is I published the 3 books in 2021. I finished the third book in December of 2021. In February of 2022, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which kind of put that whole year into a different frame of reference and a different mode of operation.
Yeah.
So we will see what happens going forward. I'm working on a 4th book about my cancer journey and enjoying the community building that I have around that.
And how is your health today?
Fantastic. At first I hesitated to say it out loud, but now I am happy to say it out loud. I am cured.
Wow, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What I found, and maybe you have found this too, is that when I published my first book, the marketing of it, the preparation for the marketing of it and the launch of it was a failure in about in every respect that you can imagine. Of course, that's an opportunity to learn, and so I ended up spending a year traveling the country doing book events, and I had an assistant, and she'd set up an event where I go to a Barnes and Noble, and they'd have 10 or 12 copies of the book. and I would sit there for 3 or 4 hours and I'd talk to people, and it was fascinating because they I'm telling this story because I think these are the people who would like to hear to read your stuff. This is why I'm saying this. Because they would come up to me and they would say something like, "Oh, is this your book?" And I said, "Yes." And they say, "Oh, well, I could never write a book." It's that, and I said, "Well, that's probably a good thing because it's a lot of work, and it's there's a lot of heartache that goes into it because you have to be really self-critical to write because you gotta be willing to change. You have to willing to discard, and you have to abandon, and things that you start going down a particular trail and it's the wrong trail, and you have to abandon that and start all over. I mean, it's a lot of that, And they say, "Oh, really? Yeah, that's interesting." And I said, "But I do think you should write, and I think you should write every day. And I don't think you should not write. I don't think you should write sentences. I think you should write phrases and words. Just write whatever comes to mind, whatever you see, whatever captures your fancy. Get a little journal and just keep that with you. And when you have a thought, write it down and come and go back to it every now and then. Don't do it with any kind of regimen. Just do it when you feel like it. And I think you'll begin to see that there's all this that is inside of you that is longing to come out in some manner, not to make you feel better or do anything, but actually has a way of communicating, connecting you with other people." And that was interesting to see how people would respond to that. And what I found was that there were people coming up to me and they were telling me really hard stories, of husbands who had abandoned them and not knowing what their future was going to be. They're 50 years old and they're not sure what their future is going to be, and so they want to do something with their family, but the family's not oriented. I mean, there was all of this. I said, "I think you should write about this. I think you just write for yourself. Don't share it with anyone until you feel like you should do that, because I think writing is you have said it, writing is a gift, and it's something not only that we give to ourselves, but it's something we give to others." So what do you think about that?
I want to just take a little trip to how you and I are here together today. I was part of a workshop called the Creatives Workshop that was put on by Akimbo. And there I met a woman named Sue Hetherington,
Yes.
who mentioned you in one of her daily posts, which led me to come and read your blog on Substack.
Yeah.
And the man who heads up Akimbo, or did at the time, Seth Godin, calls writing organized thinking. And that's what I have found it to be. And I think we will get to this, where the muses come in, is that we have all kinds of contradictory voices in our heads, and pay attention to them. They can lead us to where our true values are and the direction we want to go in.
So what's the source of all these contradictory voices? Where does that come from? What do you think?
There are a number of country songs about this, and I can't think of any of them right now.
Right.
But, it's like grandma said to do this, and daddy said to do that, and you saw this on the news, and this commercial told you should be doing that. It is the environment that you participate in, choose for yourself, if you have that capability, that informs what's happening in our thoughts, I believe.
Yes, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And we get a lot of messages, and we need good filters for those messages. And the writing helps to do that. So let's talk about your 3 books. What are their titles? Let's kind of begin at the most kind of basic level, and then let's talk about each one of them. So,
okay. The first book is called Wandering Words.
There you go.
Thank you. And the cover is actually a picture of my dog when she was a puppy in a local field. And I met a friend again in the Creatives Workshop who drew the picture for me, because the photograph I had would not be of high enough quality. And the first book is really a compilation of different stories, for the most part, that I had written on Medium during the 3.5 years that I was there posting daily. And they are what I found when writing on on 100 Naked Words is that I would start to structure my days looking for beautiful, thought-provoking, introspective ideas that might appeal to somebody else. And perhaps I find that I myself often get stuck in a rut that would perhaps nudge somebody to see something outside of their normal pattern, that they might question one of the voices in their heads and say, oh, maybe there's a different way to look at this.
That's really a very smart, clever way of listening to yourself. And so what's the next one? Was it that
The second one is Meandering Muses.
there's your dog again?
There's my dog again, and you'll see that some color is creeping into the cover this time.
Yeah. I really like the artwork on your books.
Thank you.
I like the format. I like how all of this has been put together. It's really easy to read. The type font is easy to read, and all these little line drawings are really good. Are these your line drawings?
They are not. I was not drawing at that point, but the artist who drew them came to visit me, and she invited me to go with her to a workshop where we met another artist, and I got bit by another bug, a drawing bug.
Right.
And so after that, I started drawing. So she was an inspiration for me with her line drawings and her visit and her invitation to visit another artist. She sparked something in me that I did not know was there.
I had the same kind of experience 20 or 30 years ago when I started doodling, and I would write things because I realized that the ideas that in my head were very complex and intricate, and I needed to be able to draw a picture of it for people so they could understand, and that became really helpful. So then I began to transfer those drawings. They're not like your drawings. They're just like very crude mechanical drawings. And I purchased the Visio program on Microsoft, and I began creating my own drawings. And a lot of those, I've ended up in I'm using all the time. I mean, it's like, the circle of impact that is my model. I mean, this is something I created. That little diagram is something I created as a way of helping people understand. So I think being able to draw, which is a picture, is an imaginative thing. Words are also, but they're different. They're touching different sides, and I think coming together, I think they're really great. So I like that. So is tell me about the stories that are in the Meandering Muses. How is that different from the first book?
Okay, so I would consider the first book to be personal essay or creative nonfiction. Basically, they're true stories from my life that are, embellished. It's hard to tell a story straight as it exactly happened and keep it interesting.
Right.
The second book is told from the point of view of the muses. I met somebody on Medium who introduced me to the idea of muses, and in Greek mythology, there are 9. I only remember 3. Those are the 3 that I use in my writing today in my daily blog. And what they are really are voices in my head. And there is first Calliope, who I consider to be the core of my personality. She is a harmonizer. She likes to keep people happy. She has had some growing to do to set some boundaries and to stop being such a people pleaser. Then there is Urania, who is very to the point. She gets her jobs done. She makes sure everything is running on schedule. She's the person that you would want running a project. Then Talia, it came kind of as a surprise. Talia is the free spirit, the creative one, the one who showed up when I started writing 100 Naked Words and started doing artwork.
So which one were you 20 years ago?
Calliope. with uranium, with responsible uranium, making sure Calliope stayed on task. Talia
And
was kind of hidden in the basement, I think.
so as Talia has come to the fore, what does your family think? What do they, how are they responding to what is happening to you as a person and as a writer?
That is a fascinating question. I think at this point, they're not sure what to do with this piece of me, and everybody is kind of just hanging back to see what's going to happen next, including me.
So you've got and then there's the flourishing fictions, or is it friction? Yes, fictions.
Fictions.
Oh, it could be frictions. That would also be a very good title. Flourishing. So tell what's in here? Same three muses?
This one is written as short story fiction.
Ah, okay.
And again, based on experiences that have happened in my life, but fictionalized to a large degree. And I want to comment on the color shift in the covers, because the covers are all the same, but they go from black and white to full color. And an editor I was working with suggested I watch a film called Pleasantville that had Reese Witherspoon in it. And what happens in the film is that these two young people get pulled into a black and white television show. And as they begin to introduce feeling and love into this black and white community, things start to get color. Somebody's lips have color, the dresses, flowers have color. And I believe that is what has happened to me as Talia has entered the picture. She's brought a lot of color to my personality and to my life.
That's wonderful. That's exciting. So you see, I think that's a story that many people would like to hear and would say, I would like that to be true of me. And so, am I correct in saying that all this started because you were willing to take a step towards writing that was it first had no promise or no expectation for where it was going to go, but you just felt the desire to start?
Yes. And there was an intuition that I was on a path that seemed to be taking me in a good direction. And along the way, I have met so many people and made so many relationships that have reinforced that belief and kept me going. And one of my early mentors, I call him a mentor, gave me 3 little words that have been a guiding light for me, and that is follow the energy. If I feel energized by doing something instead of drained by doing it, that's a signal that I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah, that's great. So what are people saying to you about what they're reading from you? What's their reaction?
I have a number of friends who are very complimentary and say lots of nice things, which, when they're friends, you tend to be a little skeptical. Are they just being nice?
Yeah.
But what I do here is that I have a positive message that uplifts people and does help them to see things from a different perspective.
Well, I think you're doing something which is really unique, which is writing from 3 voices at the same time within 100 words. I mean, that's no small task. And it's sort of like what a comic strip writer has to do every day. They're similar, but I find what you're doing is much more interesting because you have to create a setting, a context within the first word, basically, in order for people to feel like they're in the middle of something that they've been invited into. I think that's what I feel in reading your post every day, and in going through your books, feel that same sense of being taken into a context really quickly in order to be a part of it. And I want to be a part of it, and I want to see. I'm curious as to how these 3 voices or muses are going to be talking to each other, because I think it's a very significant, how do I say this, significant approach to communication today, because I think most people are afraid to communicate, and if they are, then they're communicating someone else's words. So they're using someone else's words to communicate, and they're not really thinking for themselves. They're not really communicating what's true to them. I mean, I've had some really ugly encounters with people who have accused me of things, of not sharing their political views or not sharing their social views, and that they've treated me really poorly. And I know that the words that are coming out of their mouth are not their words. They've gotten them from somewhere else. So the fact that you're able to communicate your three muses that are all within you in the way you're doing, I think is really important. And that's really what attracted me to having you come on here, because I think people need to hear about this. And if wondering how you sustain something like that if you were to write a full-length novel, I think it would be very interesting. It reminds me of what William Faulkner did in his novel Sound and Fury, where he has all these different voices, and it's maintained throughout a very long novel, and it was one of the most creative things that emerged in terms of novels during the 20th century. And I see you doing something similar, maybe not quite like Faulkner's doing, which is full of darkness and strangeness, but I think if you were able to create something of the level of a novel where you have these three voices, I think it would be really significant and really interesting to see, because people are going to identify with one of those voices. I think that's true. I think that what you're doing is something significant from a creative standpoint, and I wanted to encourage you in doing that. So you got the next book coming out. Is it going to look like the same as these other three?
No.
The format, huh?
Changing the format, yes. So I already have some concepts about title and the cover image, and really the main thrust or message of the book that I want to share is that challenges in life are what help us grow and evolve as people. My cancer journey, although I would not have necessarily chosen it, has improved my life tremendously when I started my treatment. So I remember specifically a day meeting my oncologist for our first visit, and some of the things he said to me, that the goal of treatment was cure. When I asked why I had this type of cancer, was it something I ate? Was it something I did? He said, dumb luck, which was like, yes, you're not blaming me. And I left that day, instead of thinking to be distrustful or angry, knowing that my way forward was to move in trust and faith and to build relationships with my caregivers, which is what I did over the past year. So much so that when I had my last immunotherapy infusion a couple of weeks ago, I was teary when I was leaving, because they in some ways became my family for that portion of my life.
And you are a person of faith. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes. And that also has been an interesting life journey. I was raised in the Lutheran faith. The God I believe in now is not maybe the God I was taught to believe in. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that we are held in our journeys here in life. And I believe the phrase that God does not give us more than we can handle. And that perspective has helped me to take the challenges as they come with courage and faith to move through them. And every time I do, I feel stronger and like I have the capacity to share more about myself and what I've learned so that it might empower somebody else.
That's beautiful. I really like that. I totally agree with you. And I think too often our approach to faith is something seeking success and happiness, when it really is about learning how to deal with the hardness of life, and finding strength and sustenance for hardship and challenge, and that really is where faith has ends up having a deeper resonance than maybe simply trying to avoid all of that and be happy. Don't worry, be happy. Well, it's kind of, I don't find that a very healthy or easy way to go, actually. So I think facing up to your challenges and trusting God in that moment is a far stronger and a more resilient way to approach what we have to deal with in life. And we all deal with it in some way or another. You had a cancer incident, and so that's tough. But it sounds like your positivity and approach to it was really kind of the source of why you came through it as well as you did. So congratulations on your coming through all of this. So what would you like us to know about you in terms of how people might want to find you, or where are you writing now? And tell us some things about that, because I would love for your audience to grow, because I think you have something to say, and I think people would enjoy reading your work. So where do we find you?
Thank you. There is an app, I don't know if I call it an app, called Linktree. And if you just enter Linktree and my name, Gail Boenning, it links to everything that I have out there, my Medium, my Instagram, my current letter on Substack, which is called 3MusesMerge. I can be found there, substack.3musesmerge.com. And I also have an Amazon author page for the books.
Yeah.
And I think if you just put in my name on a search engine, some of those things will pop up for you.
Oh, great. Well, I thank you for coming on. This has been great. And I celebrate the work that you're writing, that you're doing, and I enjoy it. And I hope others will find you and do the same. And when your next book comes out, your cancer book, let us know, and we'll bring you back on and let you talk about that, because I think people will be very interested in your story.
Thank you so much, Ed. And I would like to say a great big likewise. I am a big fan of what you are doing, the guests that you have invited onto your program. I'm enjoying listening very much to the different perspectives.
Thank you.
And I'm just appreciative for Sue Hetherington and how she brought us together.
Well, as I wrote about in my post in the podcast post today, this is an experiment, for me in networking. So I'm asking people, who do you know that you think I should know, because they would be a good person to interview, and then some of those people I'm finding as people who comment on my stuff, or are commenting somewhere else, and I'm thinking, well, that's interesting, I want to get to know them. So I'm making contacts that way, and that's kind of the way we make contact. And so it's an interesting journey to be on, and then I'm looking forward to seeing. I figured that I'm doing two of these a month. I mean, 2 of these a week, and so after in 2 years I will have interviewed 200 people, and what I will have learned and what people will have seen in that time, I think, is going to be rather significant. So, people that you feel like that would be good people for me to interview, please introduce us, and then and maybe we'll all 3 of us will come on and we'll have a conversation, because I think this is conversation that matters to people. I'm interviewing all kinds of different people, so it's not like there's one kind of person out there. And but it's really interesting to me, because I'm very curious about the way people are and the way they think, and particularly what they create. And I'm thankful for that, for you, and I wish you every success as you go forward.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, everyone. Please make sure you like and sign up and comment please comment on both here on YouTube and also on Substack, because that's a way for your voice to be heard, and we can respond to you, and we can have conversations with you. So this is part of why we're doing this, why I'm doing this. So thank you, Gail, and we'll see you again soon. And thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.